Okay, how to do a strategy case study. I'm going to give you some pretty simple steps here. First step should come as no surprise, read the assignment. It's surprising how many times students, don't read the right case or didn't follow the instructions or just make some silly mistakes. So obviously the first thing is to read the assignment. Second one then is don't read the whole thing through in tremendous detail the first time, because usually these cases have so much detail that you get lost. They say you can't see the forest for the trees. You're so busy looking at the trees that you don't see the forest. So the first time you go through the case, you should just skim the case for getting your general impressions. And what you need to do is write down then, number 3, is write down how are things going. Are things going well or are things going badly? Is the CEO losing sleep? Is the CEO afraid he or she is going to lose her job? Or is the CEO buying a new plane and thinking about taking a vacation and figuring out how to give money back to the shareholders? It's surprising how often students lose track of how the company is doing. They get so detailed into the analysis and writing up the results that they don't really indicate to the professor reading the case that they even understood if things are going good or bad. So make sure that you, in step 3, write it down and make sure that when you're doing the final write-up of the analysis that you carry that tone through, so that if things are bad, you make sure that the professor knows that you know things are bad. And if things are going well, that the professor knows that you know things are going well. And so even if you have a lot of recommendations, they're recommendations, but things are going well, but there can be some improvements. Okay. The fourth thing to do, and this is an important step that most people neglect to do, is to figure out who's the biggest competitor. And part of the reason for doing this is really to define the market that you're in. And I could have said it as make sure you define the market that you're in. But I find that most students are very sloppy when they define the market. They'll say, it's a train company, they're in the train market. Their competitors are other train companies. But actually that misses an important fact that train companies aren't really in competition with other train companies. They're in competition with transportation in general. And very often for a train company or a railway company, their biggest competition is actually either airlines or trucking or sometimes shipping via boat. And so you might have to use a little bit of creativity and imagination. But this really sets the tone for the rest of your analysis. You have to really know what's the bigger game being played here. And I'll give you a good example of this when I define who Amazon's biggest competitor is, when I give you an example of going through all these steps after this. So the fifth thing to write down on a piece of paper is list the major issues that you need to make sure you address when you're writing this case up. So very often a case study, that the documentation you're provided with as a student will give you some pretty clear indications of what the major issues are. And you got to make sure you write these down, because otherwise you might forget later on when you get confused in all the details. And even if you're not reading a case study so much as you're doing your own case research, you need to make sure that you define what the issues are that you're trying to address. So now we're finally able to get to step 6. And step 6 is where most students tend to start in. Step 6 is you actually go through the book, you go through the learning that you've had in the course, and you apply all the details of the cases using all these tools. So again, most students tend to jump right in, read the case in detail, and start applying their tools. Really, that's step 6 rather than step 1. So there's a number of tools that you'll learn in the course, in the strategy course. So there are external market analysis tools. There's the competitive analysis tool. There's a customer analysis tool. You can look at the macro trends, the industry life cycle. There's a variety of tools that you learn. You should apply all these in detail and create graphs and figures and charts and tables and fill up a bunch of pages with this stuff. And again, these are rough notes. You're not writing anything yet. You're doing your own thinking because you don't know what the case is about yet. You're still trying to figure it out. Then you go through your internal analysis, crunch a bunch of numbers. You gotta crunch your numbers. This is a big thing that separates average business people from professional business people. Average people kind of go by gut feel. They just make decisions and do what they think is the right thing to do. Professionals, and the reason why you're getting an MBA, professionals crunch their numbers. They use real rigorous analysis. They don't just say what pops into their head. They base their analysis on a quantitative understanding of reality. So this is an important thing to carry through. Anybody, for example, can start up a new business. Anybody can be an entrepreneur. It doesn't take a lot of intelligence to be an entrepreneur. Anybody can start up a new company, right? Just walk down the street and look at all the people that started up a haircutting salon or a butcher or a bakery or a restaurant or any of these other companies. But a professional entrepreneur really understands their numbers. So crunch the numbers. Buy the book for how to do a financial analysis, crunch your ratios, crunch all those numbers, and really do your good quantitative analysis. Look at your core competencies, the structure, HR culture, all those other internal company analysis tools. Again, you're filling up pages of notes that you'll use later on before you start writing anything. Number 9, you then do your strategic analysis. And again, there's Porter's 5 forces, there's the space matrix, there's the Boston Consulting Group and General Electric matrix, value chain analysis. There's some really good strategic analysis tools that you should go through. And again, you're doing this for your own rough notes. Vision and mission analysis, your triple bottom line, people, profit, planet analysis. Okay, so you've gone through 7, 8, 9, and 10. You've filled up 10, 15 pages worth of rough notes. Now you're able to clearly have an opinion, and you should write this opinion down. Clearly state your opinion of the status of the company. Back in, I think it was step number 3, you kind of had a general sense of how things are going. Are things going well? Are things going badly? But now you have to be able to say, this is what they're doing and it's a problem, or this is what they're doing and they need to change. So the next thing you need to do to set the high-level strategy is identify which of Porter's 5 generic strategies the company is using. This is step number 12. State which of Porter's 5 generic strategies they're using. And don't beat around the bush. Don't be wishy-washy. Don't say, well, they're kind of here, they're kind of there. Well, they're on the one hand they're here, and on the one hand they're there. Say this is where they are. Or say they don't have a strategy. They're caught in the middle. They're somewhat here and they're somewhat there, and that's a problem. So clearly state what their current strategy is, even if it's a bad strategy or if it's no strategy. And then number 13, clearly propose what your proposed new strategy is. And don't make me guess. Don't talk around it. Clearly say it in a sentence. Amazon's strategy is this. I think they should change to this strategy, and use the business language from the book. Use the business language that you've learned in class. Don't come up with a new term on your own because I won't know what you're talking about. Use the term that you've learned. Part of the point of getting an MBA is to make sure you use the appropriate business language, because when you use the right words, everybody knows what you mean. Everybody knows what you mean when you use the right words. If you're sloppy in your use of words, then people aren't quite sure what you mean. Okay, number 14. Now that you've identified which of Porter's generic strategies you think they should have, you want to identify 2 or 3 support strategies. So, I guess you can do a few more if you've got the time, but usually you don't have enough space when you're writing up your analysis. Most classes will limit your case analysis to 3 pages or 4 pages or something like that. And when you're writing to your boss at your company, most people don't have the time and attention to listen to 10 pages or something like that. So come up with 2 or 3 support strategies. And there are things like forward integration or retrenchment or acquisition or whatever. There's a list of them that you'll learn in the class. So pick 2 or 3 of those. Number 15, pick 2 or 3 implementation actions. For example, I think in order to do this, they should focus on changing their structure, or they should fix their corporate culture, or they should change the reward system. So pick 2 or 3 specific implementation actions. You'll probably learn about the Big 8 or the Big 10 or something like that in the class. Whatever your list of action or possible implementation topics are, pick a couple of these. Okay, step 16. Now you can go through your 10, 15 pages of rough notes that you've made, and now you can find the essential information from that 15 pages and turn those into a nice, tight appendix that you use to support your conclusions. Nobody wants to see all your thinking. Nobody wants to see a chronological analysis of, first I thought this, then I thought this, and then I thought about this, and then I looked and found this information. Nobody cares about that. They care about what are your conclusions, and then what's the data to justify those conclusions. So now that you've got your conclusions and you've got your strategies and your support strategies and your implementation, you want to put together the appendix out of those 10 to 15 pages of rough notes. Now finally you can start writing. And this is again a key mistake most students make. Most students like to sit in front of a blank piece of paper and start typing. And they get to the end of the requisite page count and they hit period and you're like, that's my assignment. You have to do all your thinking before you start writing. You have to do all of your thinking, all of your data crunching, all of your analysis, all of your appendices before you start to write, because otherwise your writing will be sloppy. Your thoughts will be scattered and it won't be a nice, tight, structured analysis. So step 17 is to write. Step 18 is to reread the assignment again. Again, you'd be surprised at how often students do the wrong things or submit it on the wrong date or make a mistake with something. Reread the assignment again, just to make sure you got everything. And then the last step is to edit, 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 and format for visual appeal. So an outline of what a possible case write-up would look like. And each professor has his or her own preference, but I think this is an outline that will go well and that most professors would agree with, is you start with a summary. This is not a murder mystery. Don't make me guess what your thoughts are. Don't make me wade through a whole bunch of information and then surprise me at the end with your brilliance. Start with the end. Start with the summary and your conclusions. Start with the status and what the major issues are. Then go through the analysis and the recommendations. Specifically say their current generic strategy is low cost. I think they should instead go to focus differentiation. Then you tie that to your strategic group map. So if you say you're going to go to a focus, state clearly who you're going to focus on, specifically who is your customer segmentation. This is really important. And then you say you're going to be different, specify how you're going to be different, and show a strategic group map on what these differences are. So it's a nice tight way to turn something in the appendix, the strategic group map, right into one of your major recommendations. Then go through your external, internal vision analysis and the so what. What have you learned from these things? State clearly what your support strategies are, state clearly what your implementation actions are, and then put in the appendix all of the essential outcomes of your analysis tools, all your charts and figures and analysis and things like that. Again, you usually will not have a lot of space. Most professors want a really short case study write-up, and the reason for this is they're training you how to think clearly and how to state in essentialized terms. So most professors don't do this to be mean or because they're lazy. They do this because they're trying to train you how to think clearly and write clearly and how to write in essentialized terms and get to the point quickly. So this is pretty much all you'll be able to fit into an outline. Then you get to do your final edit. It's surprising how important looks are. It's got to look nice. Most professors can tell within the first 10 to 15 seconds if they're holding an A paper, a B paper, or a failing paper. And very often they can tell because of what it looks like. Did the student pay attention to making it look good? Is there white space? Does it really look cramped and they try to cram too much information on and it looks ugly? Did they put the logo of the company that you're doing the case study of on the cover? Did they spell the professor's name right? Silly things like that matter. Good use of business language. You're being trained to have a common language with other people. And if you use words in a sloppy way, then people won't know what you're talking about. Or even worse, they'll think you're talking about something when you're actually talking about something else. So good, proper use of business language is important. Look at each sentence individually and say, why is this sentence here? Does this sentence make sense on its own? Is this sentence in here for a specific purpose? And if the sentence doesn't add to the overall case, cut it. So don't fall in love with your writing. Don't write a whole bunch of stuff and then say, oh, I've got to keep these beautifully written things. Very often you have to write twice as much as you need and then cut 50% out to keep the good portion of what you write. So again, each sentence has to be clear and serve a specific purpose. Don't forget your general impressions. That's why in step 3, I asked you to write down what your general impressions were. Make sure that the professor knows that you know whether the company is in trouble or not, and that you convey this as well. And finally, make recommendations. Don't be wishy-washy. Don't say, well, they could do this, they could do this, but I don't really know, and da-da-da-da-da, and you could da-da-da. Don't do that. Take a stand. Don't say, well, they could do, don't say that they could have this strategy or maybe that strategy. Say clearly, I recommend that they switch to a new strategy. Or I think their current strategy is working well for them. Don't make me guess what you're thinking. Again, this isn't a murder mystery. This isn't a novel. This is a business report. And you have to make things very clear. So I hope this is of help for you in going through to learn how to do a case analysis. This same methodology could work not just for doing a case study, but for doing any kind of assignment in any kind of an MBA class or any kind of an assignment that your boss assigns you in terms of how to think through and parse out how to write a report, how to think through doing an analysis to come up with recommendations and conclusions. So this isn't just about the academic thing of doing a case study, but this also has long-term repercussions for how you write business reports in general. Look forward to seeing your case studies.